And we are live. Welcome, coaches. I hope you're having a great Saturday. You're watching some football, drinking your choice of beverage. I'm drinking coffee out of an XO coffee cup because that's the only one that's clean right now. And I'm here with the great Dale Carlson. I said it right? Because
You
I
said it
just
right. You got
okay,
I don't know
awesome.
about the great part, but you got my last name right.
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. The fantastic, brilliant, and marvelous. I see. I said that wrong. Thank you so much for being here, Coach. I really appreciate it. And we're going to talk some Red Faught run and shoot, which is you can find a lot of information. I know that's kind of an oxymoron right now about the run and shoot, but you can find information about the different branches. But this one type of offense or the style of it, you can't find anywhere. But before we get into that, could you give us a little bit of your coaching history, who you are, and why you're amazing?
Well, thanks. Yeah, I was. I'm an old, college warhorse for sure. 28 years as a college head coach. Number of years as an assistant. I started out coaching high school football in the Chicago area, and how I got into, with Red and that run and shoot offense. I was an assistant coach at Elmhurst College, which is in suburban Chicago. And of course, I was young, thought I knew everything, thought I had all the answers. And the coach that I worked for at that time, his name is Tom Beck, who tremendous football coach. He's in the College Hall of Fame. He had left to go on into the old USFL. And I really would have liked to have stayed, but I wasn't making a lot of money. And it's one of those things where I got offered a full-time job at Franklin College in just south of Indianapolis. And of course, that was pre-internet days, and being a young hotshot guy who thought I had all the answers, didn't know how to do a lot of research looking into a job, and didn't. So walked into Red's office, and I said hello, and I thought, wow, this is going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Red was early 60s at that time, and lo and behold, after we're having some discussion, I'm interviewing for the offensive line job, and I go into a conference room with one of the assistant coaches. Terry Hepner was the defensive coordinator at that time. Terry, of course, ended up being the head coach at Indiana, but Terry puts on the video film. And I mean, my gosh, the ball is in the air. It's four wides, a lot of motion. And I'm thinking, you're pretty stupid, Dale, because you faced this same offense from Wheaton College in that the year before. And if I would have done a little research, I would have realized that the coach at Wheaton, the new coach that year, was a Franklin alum and had played for Red. And lo and behold, he's running a run and shoot. So, even with that, I got hired. And I want to tell you, it was one of the greatest one seasons. I spent one season with Red. As I mentioned, Tom Beck before, the guy that I worked for at Elmhurst College, got hired at Grand Valley State, and it was very difficult not to go up and be the offensive line coach there. But Red really shaped my coaching career. When I became a head coach in 1987, I wasn't quite convinced. The school I was at, Lakeland College in Wisconsin, I realized we didn't really have a tight end to do some of the things I wanted to do. And I was thinking, what could we do? And I'm thinking, we've got a stable of running back type players, good athletes, which is what we had at Franklin. Put the run and shoot in, and that's kind of where I started with it. And I was a run and shoot guy for a number of years. Eventually, we added the tight end, kind of morphed into Joe Gibbs and the Redskins because of personnel that we had moving on to, the different schools I was at. But we kept a lot of those run and shoot principles. And, eventually I became an air raid guy. That's a whole nother story from how that played out from actually coaching against Hale and Mike when they were in their first year at Iowa Wesleyan. But we eventually morphed into that. But a lot of those principles and a lot of the things that we did at Franklin, we kept in, and I'm sure maybe some people saw that little Unbalanced wing tee stuff I put up on a couple of different sites. That was Red Faught stuff, which I'm sure you guys are going to want to talk about a little bit today. But as I said, head coach for 28 years. I started 2 college football programs from scratch, Trine University in Angola, Indiana, Ohio, Dominican, Columbus, Ohio. I was an FCS head coach for a while. So, I've done it all different levels, but I love to throw the ball. I love the passing game, and that's what we always did at every place I coached at.
Okay. Have you always been a passing guy, or were you originally like a running guy, and then all of a sudden you stumbled upon Red and all the ways you can throw the ball, and you're like, you know what, this is actually a little bit better than just running it right up there?
No. When I was at Elmhurst College, an interesting thing at Elmhurst, and I mentioned, I said we could do a whole story on Tom Beck and the things that he did as a small college head coach, and even all he's up to. He was actually didn't have the title, but he was the offensive coordinator for Holtz one year at Notre Dame. But we threw the ball quite a bit at Elmhurst. So I say quite a bit, we're talking in the 80s, and we're in a small college team and we're throwing the ball, 25, 27, 28 times a game. And we of course did the same thing at Grand Valley, basically running the same offense. So I kind of got exposed to the passing game there. And a lot of the things that we did, I thought were very simple. Which for me was good because I was an offensive line coach. I was a defensive coordinator as a high school coach and an offensive line coach. And so I'm getting exposed to the passing game. And then I go to Franklin, where we had a very limited coaching staff. I mean, there was 4 of us. There was 2 guys on defense, 2 guys on offense. And even though I was the offensive line coach, you still had to be absorbed in every facet, of the game as we put, weekly plans together. And then when I became a head coach, I just realized that so many things that I had gotten from Red were really, really pretty simple and things that we could do. And again, I had a limited coaching staff at Lakeland College, my first head coaching job. And so I was able to take those things and do it and kind of just, fell in love as we had the success. And then as the things started to morph and, we got better and better and better and, just adding the things in. But, got to the point one year we had a 5,000-yard plus passer and 3,000-yard receivers on our team. So, obviously I love the passing game.
You said he did something simple that you were like, we can do that. What was like the simplest thing that he did that you're like, oh my goodness, this is brilliant?
So one of the basic and what Red did is he had been a wing T guy. I mean, he started at Franklin College in the late 50s. So by the time I got there in the 80s, obviously he'd been there for a long time and had tons of success. But he got Tiger Ellison's book, and he saw some of the wing T things, but he saw the passing and he saw the attitude with it. And one of the thing that I just loved that Red said, was go reckless, stay loose, and score. That was his mantra. And that's what he got the kids to believe in. And so he took Tiger's book, because Tiger talked a lot about, those sorts of things in his book. Maybe he didn't quite say it in those words, but he took Tiger's book and he kind of morphed the stuff that Tiger was doing with some of the wing T stuff in the run game early, and then kind of got away from that more towards the passing part of it. But he still had the terminology. So he still had gangster right and left. He still had popcorn pass. We still had mud cattle. We didn't run that a whole lot. But I would say that, one of the simplest things that he had, his version of a bootleg was what popcorn pass was. And it was classic Tiger Ellison. It was deep motion from one of the wings, fake the trap to the fullback, fake the toss to the wing, roll out. And it was a smash concept. And his version of smash was a 7-yard speed out and then a corner route over the top with some sort of backside route that he would call, which I don't ever remember throwing it. We probably did, but most of the time it was going to be, the high low on the corner and check it down to the wingback who came in deep motion. But just very simple stuff. Read the corner. What'd the corner do? Did he back up? Throw the out. Did he step up? Throw the corner. If it got muddy, dump it off. And so it was just very simple stuff. Now, there was some of the read things in terms of, what are you going to read a blitz? You're going to do some things. There was some of that in there, but not to the extent that Mouse did with his run and shoot. And Red and Mouse would talk to each other all the time. And they'd talk about, who was first to do it. They'd argue about that. But it was definitely different looks at taking the run and shoot.
I love that because, like you said, the run and shoot to me, when I've got the book right back there somewhere, it was built off the wing T.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found it interesting that one took it, I'm going to stay in the wing T, but add the print, like run the true run and shoot. And then Mouse was like, screw it, I'm going to just take the routes and we're just going to go nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know
Red
how
went
it's
nuts. Red went nuts. I'll tell you that. I mean, here I am, young offensive line coach, and thought I knew a lot about throwing the ball and thought I'd seen it all. And we're throwing the ball 69 times a game, and
I love it.
I mean, he wasn't bashful, and that was the thing about Red too. Is he was not going to be bashful and not be super aggressive. It was, when I say simple. I think when I'm talking about, there wasn't so much of the read things put in there, but I mean, it took a lot of work and took a lot of precision, and because he was calling a lot of it, it took a lot of, basically he had to be very intuitive. Now, also it's 1984, and so defenses were not as, you weren't seeing, match quarters and all of that stuff too. I mean, I'm going to be,
yeah, no, I completely understand.
People didn't need to do that. You were seeing I formation, you're seeing the wishbone, so people were, you're playing the 4-4 cover 3. So we're seeing teams playing 4-4 cover 3, and it's like, Katie bar the door, you're going to throw for 400 yards in that game.
You come out there in this normal standard wing T set, and everyone's like probably thinking, okay, they're going to run the ball. What the hell is going on? Why are all these receivers going out there and they're throwing the ball?
Yeah, and that was definitely part of it, because he wasn't just the double wing, double wide. When you look at he had the 4 basic formations, your typical run and shoot look. He had what was called goal line, which even though they call it goal line, did not use it all over the field. That was an unbalanced right formation, tight end left, wing T backs, wing to the right, wide receiver to the right, always run to the right, always to the right, never change.
Really? I did not know that.
Well, because again, it's like when Hail Mummy talks about right-handed, left-handed, not wanting to flip stuff. It was about trying to keep it simple.
That is awesome.
Plays, get the repetition. And Red would say, he said, you know what? He said, Butler, Indianapolis, Ashland, they all know what we're going to do. They can draw it up as well as we can. It's just about how well we execute it, because we know it like the back of our hand. And that's what Hal, said too, obviously, about why, right-handed with the tight end, all those things, which again, we could go into, I could talk for hours about that. So it was always to the right, but yet he also had what he called goal line over, which would be your standard wing T set, tight end right, wing right, wide receiver left now, because he didn't always want the receiver stuck into the boundary if we got into that situation. And then he also had a split back look, which again was the unbalanced tight end left, tackle over right. He tightened the splits down to a foot, but then the backs would be very, very wide, almost behind the tight end and the tackle, with the wing and then the wide receiver, and again, running a lot of the same concepts over that, but it was just trying to give the defense a little bit different presentation. Plus it opened up, some of the quicker throws to the running backs to let them get out into the flat, kind of some of that stuff as well. But so it was a mix of all of that defenses at that time had to get, prepared for, which again, when you're running, the 4-4 or the old monster 52 or, whatever you wanted to call it back in those days, you were not going to stop this offense. And that was the thing is, I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I showed up as the offensive line coach, and we were Division II at that time. Franklin was a Division II school at that time. So besides, our conference schools, Ashland in Ohio, Butler, University of Indianapolis, schools like that. I mean, we were playing Saginaw Valley State. We were playing Carson Newman, not conference. He had played Murray State the year before in a non-conference game. They're playing some really, really good people. And I had better offensive linemen at Division III Elmhurst College than I had at Division II Franklin. But the style of play, what he was doing, he was ahead of his time, really took advantage. And, people just didn't stop us. I mean, they just didn't. And it was a lot of fun to see.
When y'all were stopped, or when you would lose a game, and I know y'all rarely lost, was it more of an execution thing, like your players weren't doing what they're supposed to do, or did the defense do something that caught y'all off guard?
No, I mean, a lot of times it would just be, be like any sort of game. Somebody made a mistake, quarterback made a bad read, we missed a block up front, it could be a number of things. And there was, there were some times that, the fact that we were maybe not quite as talented sometimes hurt us. But again, the fact that he could take a school like Franklin at that point, compete with those schools, beat them, win some conference championships, I think just was a testament to his creativity, his ability to put the players in the right spot and have them make plays based on the talent level that that they had. And that was one of the things that I took from him. It wasn't about drawing a play up on the board. It was about, can your players execute it, and do you put them in that position to do that.
All right. I like that. Well, before I get to my next question, I want to just welcome coaches. If you're having any questions, put them in the chat. We have some coaches already here. Johnny, what's going on? Jeff, Dan, Simplify coach says Mouse Davis presented me at the Minor League Hall of Fame introduction in Palm Springs, California. We spent a morning going over his offensive concepts. It was very informative and eye-opening. He knows it well. Yes, sir. He also says that he loves to hear about your expertise in history. Good stuff, coaches. I appreciate it. Chase, what's going on? James, ODU. So if you have any questions for Coach, put them in the chat. We will talk about them. I'm curious about practice. Now, you said you only had 4 people on the staff. What was that like? And then how did y'all break it down? Was it y'all just offense on one side, defense on the other, or were y'all together? And then you were also a defensive coach or helping out the defense. How did that look?
No, we were. It was. I mean, it was separate. 2 platoon football. When I said 4, there was 4 adults. We had 1 student coach who was over on defense.
Okay, so that one made all the distance.
Yeah. So Red took all the skill guys.
Nice.
And I had the offensive line, and then we had a defensive line coach. Terry Hepner was our defensive coordinator, had the secondary, and of course he would integrate with the student coach, working with the linebackers. But it was an interesting setup. But it wasn't, when you think about the air raid type practices and as Hal talks, a lot of stuff was done with the skilled players together, skilled players and the quarterbacks, routes on air, all that stuff. I mean, that's basically what we did. Was that type of deal. When we would work on the run game part of it, and pass pro, I would have our fullback over there. We didn't necessarily do a lot of inside drill. We did more so of our run game with me working with those cats. In what we did in the run game: trap, toss, dive. I mean, we didn't have our counterplay. It was more about working with the offensive linemen, starting to get some of the timing up, and then we timed everything up on the run game with the in the team versus the scouts type of deal. But it was a typical college practice. Special teams, we each had our assignments on that. We'd break up offensively and defensively. We'd go through our individual periods, and they'd do their Scully stuff. Like I said, the run part of it, that was a little bit different than we do our team stuff. But Red, there was just a lot of repetition over and over again with the quarterbacks and the receivers, and that always stuck with me. And even as I became a head coach and we started to develop, our different offense, that part of it, even though I had coaches at that point, we always did a lot of stuff skill-wise together, because if your quarterback and receivers aren't on the same page and you're throwing the ball, it doesn't matter anyways. So you might as well, put them all together. And I don't want to say we were doing complete routes on air like Hal developed in the air raid at that time, but there'd be a couple quarterbacks up throwing different parts of a pattern. So the guys were getting work, people were catching the ball, nobody was wasting a rep, in practice. And, that's where I said where Red was ahead of his time, doing that, because you wouldn't have gone anyplace else unless you were going to Coppers Cove High School in the 80s to see that kind of stuff.
Okay. We have a question from Coach Chase. He wants to know, how do your quarterbacks read progressions in the run and shoot? Well,
the way that Red set everything up is it was kind of a read. There was a pattern read, but it was an isolation off of a defender. So let me see if this techno.
Okay, here we go, baby.
Can try and share something here. Let me try that. If we can do it.
Y'all are witnessing it first. So what he's doing is he's going up. All right, here we go. I'm gonna share
You
it.
got it?
There you go. Yes, sir. Go ahead, draw
All
it up.
right. So, so let's just say, and I'm very rudimentary at doing this. So let's just say, we got our, I'm going to give you called a gangster pass.
The classic. I love
Classic
it.
gangster. I'm not going to worry about the backside gags. We hardly ever threw it. So we got motion coming over here. Okay. And so what Red did is, and this is classic Tiger, is he numbered defenders inside out. So you wouldn't worry about a zero. So you'd have, the first defender, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Generally, there'd be somebody out here that would, I'll tell you what, Coach, I'm struggling here. So that was the 4-man. So we're running the classic gangster pass, which is, a little flare here. He's going to do, this is where I said there is some reading in here. It could be a stop route, could be a slant, could be a post, depending on what you're getting. But really what the read was the number 4-man. Okay, so if 4 rushed, all right, if 4 rushes, the ball's going right here on the slant route. If 4 backs up, the ball's going right here to the little motion flare route. If the inside linebacker here would blitz, then the ball was going to go hot right there. So there was some reading involved, and there was some pre-snap decisions that needed to be made. But basically, you were isolating a defender. That's what you were trying to do. I mean, and that's where a lot of the route stuff, came from, was trying to isolate a defender.
And right there, gangster that's the preset for slide.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, this is the preset for slide. It's the preset for 90 go and Mouse's stuff. I mean, there's so much that came off of it, but it all started with gangster.
I love it. Okay. Thanks for drawing that up, man. What's now when you went and became a head coach and you were like, all right, I'm going to run the run and shoot. Were you more like Red, or were you more like Mouse, or did you put your own like hybrid between the two? What was your offense like?
Yeah, I put a hybrid in. I put a hybrid together with it. There was my offensive line part of me, and there was also that part that I had with Tom Beck from being at Grand Valley and Elmhurst. And here's and I give you kind of a little bit of an interesting background, because this is kind of stuff that I morphed into. So Tom's background as a coach was in the Wishbone when he was a high school coach in the Chicago area. And he ended up getting hired it was called St. Procopus. It's now Benedictine University in Illinois, suburban Chicago. And he had his Wishbone offense, but he had a really decent quarterback who couldn't run very well, but could throw the daylights out of it. And he was able to break the bone, run some motion, still run some of the triple stuff, but he threw the ball. And I played against that in college. And that kind of ended up how I got my in. I just kind of forced my way. I say forced, but introduced myself one time and said, hey, I'd like to coach on your staff. And by the way, your offense was the hardest offense to prepare for when I was in college, when I played at Concordia. And anyways, I ended up getting hired. But so we still, because of that influence and the way the shoot worked out, when I looked at it, I looked at the running backs that we had at Lakeland, I thought, you know what, we could be very multiple and still potentially. I started out a little bit with the option part of it, but I scrapped it because I realized we didn't have the coaching staff to coach it nor the time. But we still presented that. So we ran, the double wing, double wide. We ran, a 3-back wishbone, 2 wide receiver set, but we threw the ball out of it, which people weren't doing. We ran some dive and then dive option just to keep people honest, but it was mainly more of a wing T type of run game combined with Red's passing stuff, and then some other things that I felt we could do, off of play action, the classic NCAA pass, post, dig, and some of those sorts of things, which we actually ran at Franklin too, off some different looks. So it was definitely kind of a hybrid both of those things, put together. But with that, in the first 2 years that we were doing that at Lakeland College, we led our conference in total offense. The first year we led in rushing offense and passing offense. The second year we led in passing offense. We were second in rushing offense. So, not that those are numbers, but the fact is we were able to move the ball and score and take advantage of the kids that we had. And that was the thing that again, stuck with me when I did this, because we had some good running backs who could catch the ball, so they could do some things in space. But, I also felt like I would have been an idiot if I wouldn't have handed it to him every now and then, where Red wouldn't have worried about that quite as much. Not that we still didn't throw the ball a lot, because we did, because we set a ton of records. But it was, again, we used the personnel, that we had. So it was kind of a hybrid. Now, when I went to Taylor University, we were more running, a combination. We did Red stuff, but I'd also gotten into Mouse's stuff with 90 go and slide, some of that stuff. But we were still running a lot of Red stuff at that time as well.
Is there a very big difference between what Mouse was doing and what Red was doing?
Yeah, because there was a lot more of it that was called and not as much reading on the run. So Red felt like he was going to put it on himself to put the kids in the position, as opposed to trying to have them, and even in Tiger's book, Tiger talks about reading a lot of stuff on the run. Red just didn't want to do that. He felt like it was his job to put the players in the position to make the plays that way. And this was what I think, again, lesson learned from Red. If we lost, it was his fault. If we won, it was the players and the staffs that won. And I think that was his humility and his humbleness from that part. I think was tremendous from that standpoint. Now, don't get me wrong. If we didn't block very well up front, maybe he lost, but I better get that straightened out. I better get that straightened out. Before we move on. Can I tell you a funny story about that?
Of course.
So we're playing University of Indianapolis. Now, Red did not say a whole lot. I think maybe I heard him raise his voice twice in that season that I was there. That was not his style. He was not a yeller. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, everybody listened. And so we played University of Indianapolis, and I don't remember, we lost a close game, and the issue came back because we got sacked like 5 times in the fourth quarter. And I'm the offensive line coach, right? So I'll never forget this. So one of my jobs was to make sure that once all the players were out, I had to go through the locker room, make sure we didn't leave it, as a mess. And our kids were really good about picking stuff up, make sure nobody left a helmet or, a thigh pad or whatever. And so I'm walking out of the locker room, and the visitors' locker room was on the far end of the home stands, away from where the parking lot, away from where the buses were. So I come around the corner, and Red's kind of just leaning up against the stands, the guy's arms crossed, and he goes, "Dale." I said, "Coach." He said, "Whatever happened in the fourth quarter, you need to fix it. It can't happen again." And he just turned and walked away. And I just went. So later that night, it was his granddaughter's birthday. So all the coaches, we had dinner and everything. And it was kind of a cool dinner, because everybody was pretty stung by getting beat. I go home that night, and we're watching whatever game was on late. We go to bed, and it's about midnight, and I get up, and Karen, my wife, says, "What are you doing?" I said, "This is driving me nuts. I got to go in and put the video on. I got to see what's going on." So I go walking in. It's like 12:20 now by the time I got over there. There's Red sitting in there. And I was so happy that I actually walked in at that time and sat down and, went through the video, and, we made the corrections we needed to make. But, he was just one of those guys that you just had immediate respect for, loved working for him, loved his knowledge, but you knew, you better get things going right. So sorry, I got off.
No, not at all. I freaking love these stories, man. And there's something about when someone you admire and you want to always do good comes in and kind of like, without saying it, they're kind of disappointed. You're like, oh crap, I need to fix it.
Yeah, I got to fix it. And you know what? And that's the type of, that's when you are in the presence of a great leader, because you want to do your job to the best of your individual ability. And that was one of the things that I tried to bring with me when I became a head coach, is I wanted guys to really, um, take pride in what they were doing. And I mean, I didn't want to make anybody feel bad, but I was always hoping that they took pride in what they did, so that if we didn't play well, they wanted to find a way to fix it. And I was very lucky to have a group of guys over the years, every place I coached, that took that to heart.
I like that. I respect coaches that don't use fear and intimidation to get their point across, and instead, they build the staff up and have their coaches want to get better because they don't want to make the boss man look bad, because they like the boss man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think that's part of the respect that you give back to your to your assistant coaches. I never wanted them to do anything I wouldn't do, and I always wanted them to feel like they had an opportunity to always put their thoughts in, and whether we did them or not. But I always wanted people to feel very strong that they could do that they could question me. Red was pretty funny about that though too. We were. And I'll be happy to get us to talk about that unbalanced stuff too. But the Broncos were actually running kind of a form of that year. And Terry Hepner and I were talking about something. And of course, I didn't realize what Terry was doing to me, because he didn't want to go in and talk to Red about it. He wanted me to do it. We're talking about how, look what the Broncos did. We're sitting drawing some stuff up and because we shared an office, and so we should go talk to Red about this. So I go in and I draw it up, and I put it on there, and I say, I think this would be a great addition, and I think there's some things we could do. And he looks at it and looks at what I scribbled up, and then he goes back down to what he was doing, and he's writing on his desk. And then he would have this thing, and I knew stuff was up, because he'd look over his glasses like this at me, and I'm thinking, okay, whatever he's going to tell me now, whatever I just said, this was not. He didn't want to do it, and he looked, because you know what? He said, someday you're going to get your team, and you can go and do whatever you want to do. But he says, you know what? Go ahead and do it, because I'm just going to kick your ass anyways. And he went back down to write what he was doing. And and I had to laugh. When I walked away, I was chuckling. And that was fine. He didn't want to do it. But, he had a way of saying some of those things to you. And it just lightened the whole mood. And says, no, we're not going to do that. He just kind of lightened the mood. And, I got the message, okay, you're not interested in doing that, but I didn't feel bad about it. I walked away laughing, so I appreciated that.
All right. Now you can't tease us about talking about the Unbalanced. Could you bring that up? And what was your favorite Unbalanced run? Because I know that's usually what a lot of people want to get an Unbalanced to do and pass. Because
let me go in and kind of talk to you about how this whole thing works.
Okay.
These are the important. Did I just StreamYard share? There we go. I'm in the show. Did that come up or no?
Yeah, go back and do it again, and share the Chrome tab.
That's what I thought I did. Share screen, Chrome tab.
And Isaac, while he's doing this, I appreciate the love, man. That means a lot to me.
Hey, you know what? Hey, Coach, it's just showing me the StreamYard. I'm not seeing the.
Do you have the tab open?
You know what? Yeah, you know what? I think I closed that again. That's I told you. What's it's
awwapp.com.
Got it. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm back.
Cooking with gas, baby. Cooking with gas.
Sorry, everybody out there in virtual land. Here we go. All right. So let's go to the Unbalanced. But this is what. As soon as you tell me we're ready.
There you go.
All right. So you had your Unbalanced look. Tight end. I apologize for my lousy drawing skills. I'm just
I was about to say I'm
third grade, and I got a poor in penmanship. Okay, so
I'm glad I'm not the only one that draws like this. This thing's difficult.
So here's the whole thing is how this works. So obviously we've got tackle over, tight end left. This guy could be a traditional tight end. We really, the year that I was at Franklin, we used like a big, tall wide receiver who wasn't afraid to stick his nose in there, and I'll show you why. And then we had a kid who actually got some pro looks as an outside linebacker. But we would stick him there every now and then and let him do a couple of things. So we did kind of have a two-way player to do that. But the whole thing is based on what called the hand sweep or wagon west out of Tiger's book. So you're coming in motion and you want this wingback to be going full speed right here. Quarterback's got to time it up where he's going to hand the ball off, and then it is just zone blocking like you're running outside zone, and he's on the first defender that shows, he's on the second defender that shows, and we're trying to find like Vince Lombardi said, you're trying to find a crease and then just speed it. So that's the basis. And if you can't do that, you can't run this scheme. That it's that simple. Don't even waste your time if you can't get the ball out on the edge, because everything you're going to do off of this comes off that deep motion. Okay. So anybody got any? Do you see any questions? Anybody need anything? Got anything with that? And it's just outside zone. It's just you're running outside zone. That's what you're doing.
Nothing else. No questions so far.
All right. So let's take this. We'll clear that. And let me go. So now, just draw. All right. So now, get a little better. So the next phase is going to depend on how are they defending you in the box. What kind of look are you getting in the box? And I don't want to go because I'm bad at this, but so let's just say you're getting, so they're now, you've run the speed play. So now you've got this defensive end standing way out here someplace.
Okay.
Or they're rolling a corner down or the safety, something. They're taking away the outside stuff. So now you want to look at in the box, what can we run? Well, the three plays then that you would run off of it, I put my own spin on it. I'll give you Red's and then I'll give you mine. Is you can run ISO weak, power strong, fullback trap. And then what I did, because we weren't necessarily a power team and I didn't want to play with it, we just ran the old G scheme, wing T G scheme. Okay. So if we got a one technique here, so let's just say we had a one technique, we're going to put him in motion. All right. And now we're just going to run ISO. Just going to run ISO, play fake here, and then quarterback's going to set up here. He's going to continue out here trying to hold who's ever on the edge, and we're just going to run straight, some sort of ISO in here.
Nice.
Okay, so that would be the next type of deal. All right, so if I can get this to erase, trash, clear. All right, so next. All right, so let's say. They're doing something now to where, you've got that three technique sitting in here with the defensive end. Sorry, I didn't mean that to be a nose. It was supposed to be a V. That looks like somebody with a big nose. So now you've got something over here where they're playing, maybe three technique, and now you got the one or the shade. You got your five technique out here. You got a defender out here. All right, so now, you might want to look at potentially power. The reason I didn't like power was trying to black back on three. You could run trap, which is fine. But we looked at like, okay, strong side ISO. And I'm sorry, I skipped that. Well, now we would just run strong side ISO in here. And depending on what they're doing in the secondary, we might not motion him. We might motion him across. It depended on what kind of look you were getting out here, but we could run strong side ISO. If they gave us the three technique here, that's where we got into the G scheme, which I liked better because it just fit better with what we were doing because we weren't running the power. So I didn't want to get into teaching power blocking. So that's why, so we would run ISO strong if we got a one. If we got double threes, we would kind of run a G scheme back this way. Okay. So that was pretty much the run part of it. Obviously, fullback trap is in there. You could also run the other thing that we did too, and again, this is kind of tied in with just because you're basically running outside zone. The other thing that we did, because this would come into your passing stuff as well out of this. is we would run this back in motion and run a toss to him. The whole idea with that was to get him out here. He wanted to catch the ball in the wing tackle gap because he wanted to outrun the defense. And pretty much what everybody was doing is they were zoning for the next man down. So what I mean by that, if there's a defensive end there, he's going to try and cross his face if he can and get up to the linebacker. He's going to try and zone up there. He's going to try and do the same thing. And we just tossed the ball out here and used our wheels to, take the ball out here on the edge.
Kind of like the rocket sweep and the flex bone type deal.
Much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, but it was a wide toss. We'd have the quarterback reverse pivot just to try and hold the linebackers a little bit with the fullback coming that way, and then he had to turn and there that takes some time. That's a skill you got to teach that kid to be able to toss that ball out there that far. You don't think it's that far. He doesn't think it's that far. The first few times you do it, it's either going to be short or he's going to throw it to you on the sideline. But with some repetition, again, you can do it. And pretty much because it's pretty much just outside zone type of blocking, we felt like that was a pretty simple thing to do off of it.
Okay.
Let's put the run game out of it.
And then your passing game tied off of that?
Then the passing game would come off of that. So let me erase this thing again. All right, go. Erase. There we go. So then what you were going to take, the first thing we were going to do, throwing the football off of it, all right, it's called Guards East.
Guards East?
Guards East, yeah, Guards East. And the reason it was called that, see, Red didn't have numbers. He had names. Every play was named. There was no numbers. It was all a name thing. So we'd come in motion, and again, quarterback would open up, make the play fake, and you'd want him to set no wider than the guard. And it was called Guards East because you think about a compass. This was wagon west, so we're going west. Guards East, somebody in here was going to pull to protect the edge. Now, I'll tell you, when I ran it, we didn't run it, the protection that way, but that's just where the name came from. You can sit down and we could spend hours on protection. I'm not going to get into that unless somebody really wants to. So the basic play off of this was just a takeoff route out here. All right. He would run kind of a wheel or a stop route. He kind of hold right there. The Y would run, Red called it a drag. It was 6 to 7 yards. Get across the field as fast as you can. Don't stop running. And then the halfback in the backfield would run a choice route. Depending on speed, how bad he got beat up, he'd work at 8 to 10 yards, and then he could settle it down. He could run vertical. He could run to the post, or he could run a dig route. And pretty much the quarterback pretty much should know, am I going to take a shot here? Okay, if the shot's not there, I never pass up the crosser. If the crosser's open, I'm throwing him the football. If the crosser's not open, I'm finding the choice route, and maybe I'll get back to this, but this very rarely got thrown, although we ended up doing some things that, there was some progression to get to this part of it. But this was the basic thing that we taught and that you had to be able to master, was being able to never pass the crosser up, and then this cat right here being able to run this choice route. And you had to have a guy that could do it. There was some learning that had to get involved in here to read defenses, to know how to react, and obviously for your quarterback to be able to pick up, what's the defense doing. And that's where your pre-practice, your meetings and your film work and all that stuff come into, for you to get these guys on the same page, and then, your practice time. But this was the basic part of that play was goal line Guards East.
And to me, that looks like a locked 61 choice. Like you're taking away the choice by the single receiver, but everything else.
Yeah. Now you can start to add some of that stuff in over here if you wanted to. Like we progressed at one point to where we read this as either a go route or breaking it off. We went as far as doing that 1 year with they had a kid that was just really good at reading it. But you can also have some called routes here too. So, you can call Z post, so you could call Z post. So he had to know that the only thing he couldn't do was run a post route, but he could still run a vertical. He could run a corner route off of that. he could still run his dig route. A lot of times what would happen is you'd go Z post and he'd run the dig. So you had the over under on the safety. You as a play caller, you would put that in, you would call that because maybe you were getting single high coverage. Okay, so is he going to take the post? If he's going to take the post, then we're going to take the dig.
Okay.
If the linebackers jump the crossing route, that's great. Now, again, you never pass the crosser up. So post isn't there, crosser's open, we take it. The post is gone, linebacker stepped on the crosser, so you're back here, on the dig route.
That's nice. That's a great, and I know that was kind of like the secret sauce that no one really talked about in Red's offense was this over unbalanced. I've been able to find some stuff about this, and everybody that I've talked to that kind of knows a little bit about the offense says the run and shoot's great, but you need to get this stuff. This is like the untalked about stuff that was really effective anywhere on the field.
Yes, and it's true. And I'll give you an example. We're playing St. Joseph's College that year. I was at Franklin, and it was just one of those days. It poured the entire game. So it's hard to get grip on the ball, throwing the ball down the field. And, Red was not bashful at throwing go routes on the outside. And, we didn't call it a backside shoulder fade. I didn't know what a backside shoulder fade was until I, started to hear guys talk about it on TV, but we threw backside shoulder fades all the time. Our guys just knew how to do that. That was just part of the stuff that he coached, but it's pouring rain. So we were in goal line almost the entire ball game, and we rushed for a couple 100 yards. We threw a couple touchdown passes, to the tight end coming across, and he just split people because they fell or whatever. We hit a couple of these throws down the field, but it was a really good equalizer. We had another game later in the year where it rained hard, lightened up, but the field was real muddy. And so we got into this, and we're able obviously to control and win the game. And I would run this, when I did it, the few years that I did it, we would run it coming out, going in, starting series is off. It's a complete offense in itself. We're just touching. You could just take the run plays I showed you and this pass and have a change-up deal that isn't really hard to teach. You could, I think, go up and down the field against people. And we did it, And we even got to the point, one year I had a really bright quarterback. And a lot of times we'd get into this look, and I'd just let him call the play, based on what he or pass. And he did a really good job with it.
That's something that I am testing now, is giving your quarterback a little bit more freedom to do things. And I am going, Ron, why in God's name did you not do this sooner? It makes things a little bit better from a play caller standpoint, because there's sometimes when we call a play and we're like, oh crap, that was a bad play. And if they can check it out, did you do that? Because I know you said that you went to house stuff.
Yeah, as I told you, I was an offensive line coach starting, and I ended up coaching. I coached quarterbacks for 25 years. And as I said, I'm not so sure I did a whole lot for them, but I had guys throw for a lot of yards, did a lot of good things. But one of the things I always felt like, one, because I didn't play quarterback, and two, because I'm not out there playing, having, 4, 5, 6 really angry people, trying to knock my ass to the ground. That there were times that I thought, you know what, you're the guy that's playing the game. So, make some calls. And there were times where I had guys that were really good at changing plays at the line of scrimmage. The kid that threw, Chris Reichert was his name, who threw for all those yards. That was 2007 at Ohio Dominican, and we were much more of an air raid team at that point. But Chris was one of those players, and he's the head coach at Tiffin University, D2 school in Ohio. But Chris was one of those guys that just was so intuitive and just saw the field. You talk about running backs having vision. Yeah. I believe great quarterbacks have vision on the field to see things happening. They have such a great understanding of their opponent. And Chris was one of those guys. And there would be times, and he didn't as a freshman. He started for us as a freshman, but as he progressed, by the time we got to the end of his sophomore year, he could check to anything in the playbook. sometimes I had quarterbacks where I limited their checks to, you can check to these, 6, 7 things. Chris was one of those guys, he could check to anything. And there'd be times I'd be on the sideline and I'd be like, oh, what did he just check to? And, oh, I didn't see that. And we get a big play, So I think it depends on the kid too, but I think you're right. You've got to give them some ownership. And I always felt that way. If they had ownership, they would take the film study more seriously. They would take time on their own. You wouldn't have to hound them to get on the huddle to look, at home at night after they're done with their homework or whatever, because you give them some ownership.
I want to know what made you go from the run and shoot to Joe Gibbs to the air raid. What is that transition? And walk me through it, man, because when you said that tripped me out a little bit.
Well, so I'll give you somebody else who one of the others. So I mentioned a coach by the name of Tom Beck, who was a tremendous influence. Red obviously was a tremendous influence. I had the opportunity to in 1989 when Hale went to Iowa Wesleyan. I was at Lakeland College. We played them, and I knew that what he was doing was different. Wasn't quite sure how it was different, but it was different. In fact, I remember when the assistant coaches came into my office and said, "Oh, yeah, see, have you watched their offense yet?" Because I was coaching offense, calling the offensive plays, and I said, I was looking at their defense. I hadn't gotten to that yet. It was Sunday afternoon. He says, "Yeah, a lot of run and shoot stuff in there." So I put it on, and I'm looking at it. And I looked at him and I said, "I should fire you right now." Because what are you talking about? I said, "We run the run and shoot. That's not the run and shoot. There's some similarities to it, but it's not the run and shoot." And Hal will say that. People will always say, "Well, you're running the run and shoot." No, he wasn't. So anyways, they beat us, close game. But I got very enthralled with it. Well, when I went to Taylor University, I had the opportunity. I got to meet Sam Rutigliano, and I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Coach Sam. Sam was head coach of the Cleveland Browns, 70s and the 80s. He then was on NBC doing games for a while. Got hired at Liberty University, but I met Sam at a camp. He had been to Taylor before speaking, and if you ever go to Upland, Indiana, this little itty bitty town between Fort Wayne and Indianapolis. Besides Taylor, there's a place called Ivanhoe's that has the absolute best milkshakes I've ever had in my life. They're so thick, you got to eat them with a spoon. But anyway, Sam said, "I've been to Ivanhoe's and I've had the chocolate chip mint shake." So we started talking. So I went down to Liberty, and Sam and Joe Gibbs were good friends. They had Sam, of course, had the tight ends, so they were doing some of that stuff. But they were still doing, they were doing some run and shoot stuff. I mean, Sam wouldn't call it that. It was some Bill Walsh stuff, but it was classic run and shoot football. So, anyways, so I started. We were still doing that sort of thing. I move up to Trine University in Angola, Indiana. I'm going to be the first football coach there. Going to start the program. Of course, we got to recruit players. I mean, they're starting football not because they want to win championships. They're starting football because they want more students. So we went out and got them students. And I recruited a couple of guys, tight ends, who could block, but who could also get down the field, could catch, could run a little bit after the catch. And so you're going to coach players that you have, right? So we ran a lot of the same concepts, had some stuff that Sam was running. We were running the run and shoot stuff, still running, the NCAA post dig, play action. We're doing all that stuff, but we had a couple of guys that we could go tight end wing, and we even the tight end wing stuff, we were running some of that. It wasn't the goal line unbalanced stuff because I'd been doing that at Taylor, but it was some of the same stuff with two bigger bodies on the edge running and being able to do those things. I don't want to say I invented split zone, but we started running split. I didn't know what that was. We just thought, hey, we got this big body. Let's bring him across versus an 8-man front. And maybe I saw somebody do it. It's very possible. We just stole it from somebody most likely. I didn't know that was split zone. Never heard of that before. But my point is we just used the players that we had. So we didn't. We had a lot of success at it was called Tri-State then. In our fourth year, we played in the NAIA national semifinals with our first group of seniors. We were nationally ranked every year after that. That whole deal. Throwing the football. We ran the ball. The offensive line coach and me, because I had some good running backs. We ran the football. So I get hired at Ohio Dominican University, Columbus, Ohio, to start the program there. I know Hal. Hal was at Southeastern Louisiana, and just so happened that a good friend of mine, who was the defensive coordinator at Elmhurst College and Grand Valley State with us, he went the AD's route. He's the AD at Southeastern Louisiana, actually brought football back, hired Hal. So I go down to spring practice after their first year, because we were dabbling a little bit in that. We were running shallows. We were running all curl. We were running, of course, verts. We were doing a lot of those things. I didn't know it was really Y cross. We had a version of Y cross, but I didn't really understand it. So I went down there. Well, let me back that up. We're at the football coaches convention, and Chris Hatcher is speaking, and Hal comes in, sits down next to me. He says, "Hey, Dale, how you doing? It's been a long time." We start talking, and so I'm listening to Hatcher talk, and I'm realizing I really don't understand this stuff. So I called Hal up. I said, "I'd like to come down," because we were putting the program together. We didn't have spring practice that year. I just kind of recruiting. And I spent a week with him, and I got the nuts and bolts of the offense. And I decided that, looking at some of the kids we had coming in, I felt like we could, I just went full bore mesh, shallows, white cross, all curl, sail, the whole shot. I just felt like it was a good fit, and we'd been doing some of that stuff already. It was just trying to understand how it all fit together, and it just fit the kids that we had, and that's kind of how I morphed into the air raid stuff. But we added the last year I was at Ohio Dominican. We didn't quite have the players at tight end that we'd had, so that's when we put the Unbalanced, the goal line formation back in. Had a lot of success. With that, and we had just had a number of good running backs. We had to figure out how to get them in the game in a one back system, even though we did a lot of the two back stuff as well. But how do you get those three guys, three good players in the game like that? And then that's how we did it.
I freaking love that. Now, gun to your head, which one do you like better, the air raid style or the run and shoot?
You know what? Here's the thing, and I think it's more about again how you fit the players to your system, because we still were running 90 go. We were running choice, and especially choice in the follow stuff that June Jones, put in when he was at Hawaii. We were doing that. So and when Hale and June kind of morphed it a little bit together, and even some of the stuff that he was doing in the XFL, we just kind of morphed the best parts of it together. I mean, if it was me, mesh is my favorite play. Anybody that knows me, worked for me, coached against me, we're gonna run mesh. I love Y cross. I think Y cross is a great play. I think sail's a great play. Shallows are a great play. Everybody runs verticals, and then so what else are you going to put in your offense? So there were times we had 90 go. There were times that we always ran the follow stuff, with it. But we kind of had a combination of the two, along with your quick game stuff.
Okay, and there is a question, another one from Chase. He wants to know, what is the biggest distinction between the run and shoot and the air raid? And as someone that has coached in both, I'm deferring to you now.
Yeah, again, I think it's more. I think the difference really with the run and shoot, and I think this is true in the air raid. There is some reading in the air raid,
a little, but not as much as
what you have in Mouse's version of the shoot.
Yeah.
Now, those guys they started to limit that a little bit as well. But there's still a lot more reading and getting your quarterback and receivers on the same page, more so in the run and shoot than there is, in the air raid stuff. And I think that's the biggest part if you're going to go there. But like I said, with what we did with Red, there was some, but there wasn't a lot. As I said earlier, he felt like he was the one that had to put the kids in the position to execute.
Okay, good. Where the practice is different, like ideal. So how did you do the same practices like the air raid did?
Yeah, you know what? I was doing it when I didn't before I actually sat down with Hale. We were doing a lot of that stuff without really realizing we were doing it.
Okay.
I always felt like I never wanted one quarterback standing back there and just throwing one route to one kid, or two quarterbacks back there throwing two routes to one kid. And this went back to when we started the program from scratch at Tri-State, and we had all these kids. We were basically all freshmen. We didn't have, like some schools, they have a year where they have a fall practice and a spring practice, so they've got two classes. I mean, we brought in 130 kids, and we were going to play a game. And we were going to play a game against some of the best teams in the NAIA. And so we had to get as many reps in as we possibly could. Now, the way that I did it at that time is we would kind of split and have two groups going back to back. So we'd have two quarterbacks throwing outside routes in one group, and then we'd have two quarterbacks throwing inside routes to the other group. So it wasn't quite the routes on air thing. That's how we did it, and so I did that the first few years, or I did that all the way through at Tri-State. And then when I went to Southeastern and really got the nuts and bolts on the practice part of it, that's when I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. So we went to the full routes on air, type of deal with that. But I mean, it was still, very similar. You're going to do your warm up stuff. You're going to do your quick game. You're going to do your kicking game. You're going to do routes on air. You're going to do your team stuff, your screens, your inside drill, all that stuff.
Were the game planning, how you game planned in each system, was it different? Was it the same? Was there some things that are different, some things that were same? How did that work?
Well, it was interesting when. And again, I became a head coach in the early 80s. We did very little, and I was not exposed to a whole lot of scripting. We did some openers, some of those things. But, not a lot of scripting stuff was done. There were some situational things situations we worked on. But, it was more, what's the defense look like? What's their down and distance tendencies? And then let's get in and start calling plays. When I went to Tri-State, so I'd been a head coach for a while. That's when I really started to get into, okay, we had our script. I mean, we did a 20-play script to start.
Oh, wow.
I started to get a little bit more tuned into, having, not so much an open field plan, but getting our goal line stuff, red zone, goal line, that all those things put together. We spend a lot more time, really trying to develop those things. Again, we morphed again when I went to Ohio Dominican, and I thought this was one of the things that and this part of came out of what I got from Hale too, because we talked a lot about practice planning and scripting and those sorts of things, and I became, very much like him, having the coming out script. The green zone, the open zone script, your plus 20, plus, whatever, 14, plus 7 stuff, and spending the different times during the week, working on those areas and having those periods, spread out. So, our first Tuesday team thing would be coming out from the goal line. That was the first thing that we did. And then it was mostly third down type of deals. And then Wednesday would be goal line, red zone, openers, little third down review, and then Thursday was kind of a mash together. But it just evolved, I think, because I became a better coach, I became a better understander, I became a better student of the game. And our game planning went. But again, I think your game planning is built around what are you seeing and what can your players do. And then you figure it out and you put it together from that standpoint.
Okay. Well, coaches, I just dropped his Twitter. I always want to say tweeter for some reason. And in the chat, Coach, I appreciate you being here, man. My wife just sent me a text. The kids are going nuts downstairs. So I apologize, but I would love to get you back on later on and talk some more. I'm interested in that Unbalanced. I want to go deep. I want to do a deep discussion on the Unbalanced.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I guess I just scratched the surface with it in terms of what you can do, especially throwing the football. screens. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that we could literally spend hours. So I would be honored and happy to come back with you, Ron, and talk about whatever you want to talk about with it.
Yes, sir. Let's mark this down. Let's put it back on the calendar. Coaches, thank y'all so much for being here. Steven, he says he liked the gold line package from Red's system. Thanks, Coach. Good stuff. That's another guy right there that I know, Steven. He is all about the run and shoot, man. He's trying to find Red stuff as well. Is there anything you want to talk about real quick before we go? Plug anything? Say anything?
Hey, you know what? I mean, you know, I'm, you know, my mission, you know, right now is to be a great resource and help people become better coaches. Not that I, of course, have all the answers, but you know, I'm happy to share, you know, with people and try and help and, you know, share some of the things, the good things I did, the mistakes that I made, all those things through, you know, almost 40 years of coaching. And, you know, the more I can help people, I'm happy to do it. So put my Twitter in there, hit me up. Be happy to talk to anybody.
All right, Coach. I appreciate it. And coaches, thank y'all for being here. Be safe. Let's watch some football. Let's enjoy it. And until next time, let's continue to master the spread, score points, and have fun. I will